Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, where we are on a mission to save the world through simming one insanely interesting flight at a time. Today we're going to enjoy the sights around Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I got the idea to come up here because one of our members on our recent group flight that we took, the one we just took a couple days ago, is from this part of the world, so I figured what the heck, I'll just come up here and check it out for myself. And it looks pretty cool. It's a photogrammetry city. The only real issue, as you're going to see, is the natural scenery isn't great. There's a lot of those geometric trees and things like that. The buildings look pretty good, but trees don't look great for some reason. But there's enough other interesting stuff up here to definitely make it worth our while, so we're going to do it. And I got to be honest with you guys, I really just wanted to fly the R66. I picked it up a couple weeks ago when it was on sale. Not terribly different than the R44, just a little bit bigger, but I figured this was a nice circuit for it, so we're going to go ahead and take it. And I have all the other Robinson choppers, so I figured I'd just go ahead and complete the set. Let's go ahead and get it at least started up, and then we'll take a look at the Google map, and then we'll let it run up for a minute while we're doing that, because it needs to do that. So let's jump down here and hit the starter, and then give it some fuel. There we go, that tiny little thing. Fuel, chapstick cap, and that should catch here in just a minute. Let's go ahead and let the GPS start getting fired up too. I did have a flight plan drawn out for this, but as I'll show you in a minute, there aren't really any airports around here, so it's going to be definitely for helicopters if you want to take it. And if you do, as always, it will be included in the video description, so you can load it up into little nav map if you like. Well, that thing's just going to take its dear sweet time. Okay, well, while it's doing that, let's just look at the map here. Okay, so here's Nova Scotia way over here. That's Canada up there, obviously, New England and stuff. Eastern U.S. is over there. And Halifax is right smack dab in the middle of it. And initially, I was going to take a seaplane flight, because this is their big airport up here, and they got another huge one down here, which you cannot select in the sim, although we are going to land there, because now it's a helicopter base, but you can't even select any helipads in there, and there are no add-ons for it, so hint, hint, hint for all you modders. So I was going to take a seaplane from right here, because that was the next closest base, but I couldn't get the right angles and everything for what we wanted to see, so, and I really want to take the R66, so that's what we're doing. So the place that we're going to leave from is this little park over here, and there's hospitals with helipads, there's some ships with helipads. Again, none of them are available in the sim though, but I did mark them on little nav map if you want to try to take off or land there. So we're going to leave from right here. We're going to come up this way, come around this little bridge on this side of it, and then cross over the McKay Bridge over here. Check out a little historical spot they have over there, the Africville Museum. And then come around here, a very interesting cemetery this Fairview is. There's some interesting people buried in there, I'll tell you about that. And then cruise on down here to look at some more piles of dead bodies that are buried in the ground over here. Unmarked graves. A little hint for that, little teaser. And then we'll come down along this way. They got a couple forts down here on Point Pleasant, and then there's tons of forts out here. There's forts all over the place out in this harbor, so that's what I really like about this flight. So we'll cruise down along this way, check all those out, and then come over to Mcnabs here, and man, is this a fascinating island. Come over Lawler Island, which also has some pretty cool history, and then come back around this way to check out the big fort they got on this place, the massive fort they have there on top of the Citadel. And then we'll cruise around the Donaldson Bridge over here, and then we'll come on back around to this airport, which has plenty of helipads for us to select, but again, unfortunately, you just cannot select them in the sim. And there's also a little aviation museum, which I didn't check out before, but we'll kind of cruise around this way just to see if we can spot any planes as we're coming in. So that'll be fun too. Don't know how long this flight will be because I haven't taken it fully yet in this helicopter, but we're about to find out. Probably less than 30 minutes in the air, I would think. All right, now the GPS is going to work. Okay, so let's bring that throttle up. This is not the live weather, by the way. It is cloudy and foggy and nasty. So I put it to the high cloud setting, but left the wind up a little bit just to make it a little bit more fun. Okay, and we got all that stuff on, so that's good. Let's check our baro just for the heck of it. Wow, that sped up pretty quick. That was cool. All right. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and do it. So we'll start by zooming out a little bit and talk about the history of Nova Scotia, the entire province, which means New Scotland in Latin, which is kind of coincidental since we were just up in Edinburgh, Scotland before this. This is a Canadian province and the second most densely populated, with a current population of around 1 million in all of Nova Scotia. But it's also the second smallest province, which tells you just how much open space is up here. It was inhabited by the indigenous Mi'kmaq people when the first European settlements popped up in the early 1600s, and though the first of those was French, they continued to slug it out with the Brits, the French did, until it was officially handed over to England in 1713. Since it's a little bit windy here, I'm going to have to keep both my hands on the controls, but I think everything will be pretty easy to spot, so I won't do much mouse pointing. There's a lot of tiny stuff we're going to have to look at. But Halifax is the capital of the province and has roughly 500,000 residents, which, if you do a little quick math, is about half the population of Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq were calling it Chibuktuk before it was renamed after the second Earl of Halifax in 1749. And from what I could gather, this area really blew up as loyalists to the crown were hightailing it up here from the colonies as the American Revolution was heating up. And they had a lot of British bases up here. It was kind of the closest big port that wasn't in the colonies, from the colonies. And a fascinating little blurb I read in the history section of the wiki page about Halifax was the story of the SS Mont Blanc. That was a French cargo ship that was sailing through here in 1917, packed to the gills with ammunition. And right at the end of this bridge over here on the other side of it, on December 6th, it collided with a Belgian ship called the SS Emo, right around where that big green spot is, right over there to our left. And the ensuing blast would go down in history as the largest man-made explosion ever before the advent of nuclear weapons, killing over 2,000 people and injuring another 9,000 and completely vaporizing that area behind that green spot down there. So that was the McKay Bridge we just flew by, which opened in 1970 with a bit of controversy. This coastal area down here that we just flew by is the town of Africville, not Africaville, Africville. And that was the site of a black community that got started in the mid-1800s as the locals pushed them off to the least desirable land in the area, which stayed mostly undesirable all the way up until 1964 when the city made everyone still living down there clear out to make way for that bridge and some other industrial projects. But now they got a big park with a museum dedicated to the history of Africville down on the other side of it. Okay, it's going to be hard to pick it out, but Fairview Lawn Cemetery is going to be sharing a border with this train yard right down here to our left. And what's interesting about that place, and there's 3 cemeteries, that's one of them over there, is that there's a section containing 121 victims of the Titanic sinking, more than any other location in the world. You really can't tell where the tombstones are down there, but it was just to the left of that train yard. And most of those were never identified, about a third of them, they said. And those of you familiar with that sinking probably know the Carpathia brought the 705 survivors back to New York. So why did they bring all the bodies up here? Well, this was the closest major port to the sinking that also had a railway connection, so they kind of made it their base of the recovery operations. All right, in just a moment, we're going to see a little clump of land known today as Dead Man's Island. It was originally called Target Hill when it was used for target practice by British troops during the War of 1812. But once they built a big prison on neighboring Melville Island, and Melville is that one with the big marina down there, and that little kind of harbor-looking thing, that's where the prison was. That's Melville Island, and directly on the other side of that little clump of trees is where Dead Man's Island was. But they started throwing deceased prisoners in canvas bags and planting them in unmarked graves on Target Hill, earning it the current title. And they stopped using it as a human landfill in 1847, but not before they had discarded as many as 300 or more bodies down there. But not wanting a perfectly good island to go to waste, a businessman named Charles Longley turned it into an amusement park, probably haunted, in 1907. And as you can imagine, after a few good storms blew through, some of the bodies started coming up out of the ground, so they just turned it into a public park in 2005, probably still haunted. That thing sticking up down there, right down by the water on that other little point, is called Dingle Tower. And that was donated by local resident Sir Sanford Fleming in the early 1900s. To commemorate Nova Scotia achieving a representative government 150 years prior. And if you've never heard of Sir Fleming, he's the guy who introduced standard time to North America, and he designed Canada's first postage stamp, so yeah, you can have a tower for that, yes? Alright, we're going to see our first of many forts up here ahead on the tip of that peninsula, situated in the middle of that green area called Point Pleasant Park. And it's a big round thing with about the same dimensions as a modern oil tank, and it's called the Prince of Wales Tower. It was built by the Brits at the end of the 1700s, and was one of 5 originally positioned. That's it, right down there, see it? Off to the left. But they built 5 of those things to protect the coastal batteries, a few of which we'll see here in just a minute, but that's the only one that's still standing. And they got a few more small cannon emplacements tucked down in that park, but really can't see them from over here. But I'll show you guys all those when we look at the satellite map at the end. We're not going to have any trouble seeing these next few. First will be Connet Battery, which was built for World War I to supplement all the other defenses already in place out here. And this was the last of any of them to go up. That's going to be right down there on the left by the water, that open spot. It's totally abandoned now, and it's part of a public park, but you can still crawl around over all the casemates, which I would gladly do if I was in the area. But I saw pictures on the ground. It's all spray painted and everything, and crumbling. Next is York Redoubt, and this one appears to be in slightly better shape with a bunch of cannons that they did leave down there. It's just coming on the other side of our console. All those white things are where the cannons are. That was built in 1793 and used all the way up through 1956. And during World War II, they built an auxiliary battery down along the coast, which you really can't see from here, to protect a big submarine net that stretched across the harbor over to Mcnabs Island, which we're going to explore next. And this last one up here is Sandwich Point Battery. They also built that prior to World War I, but upgraded to larger naval cannons during the Second World War. You can't get out there today if you're a civvy because it's all owned by the military. And that's one of their buildings down there to the left. But there doesn't appear to be much to look at because it's all just crumbling concrete. So this is Mcnabs Island up ahead. Before we get over to the main part of it, I want to mention this little point that we're going to see here in just a second. See that right down there? That's the site of Major's Beach Lighthouse, which went up in the early 1800s. And what's interesting about that thing is it is where in 1851 a guy named Abraham Gesner started testing out a new type of fuel he invented to replace the traditional whale oil used to produce light in those lighthouses. Well, after a lot of skepticism and careful testing, it turned out his fuel did in fact burn more efficiently, rapidly becoming the new standard. And today we call his invention kerosene, though some of us might just call it Jet A. Before we turn and lose sight of it, that strip of land on the other side of Mcnabs here is Lawler Island, and that was the location of a huge quarantine facility for immigrants from 1866 to 1938. And there's nothing but the wall of an old cistern left of it today, but judging by some of the old ship's records I was scrounging through, they moved a lot of people through that place. And one dark note worth mentioning is that there were apparently tons of people who died of various diseases while on the island, which is kind of the point, I guess. But there's only 8 grave markers, and no one's really sure where all the rest of the bodies wound up. Maybe over there on Dead Man's Island. Okay, that big open area we see down there is what's on the main island here, is what's left of Fort McNab, named after the island. And right down that little opening right there to our left, right along the coast, there's some foundations of some old searchlights. They weren't used for aircraft, but trying to spot torpedo boats coming in here, which is kind of interesting. Right there in that open spot. The bigger one up there is Fort McNab. And that was built in the 1880s and wasn't decommissioned until 1959, and it looks like they've got some big naval cannons still in place at that one too. I'm talking really big. It was cool to look at that on the ground. Can we see the cistern over there? I'm not seeing anything. There's just nothing left on that island. It's crazy. Right down over there, that area that would go out to where the lighthouse is, see that big white strip? That's Hangman's Beach, and that place got its name because the Royal Navy would hang the corpses of executed mutineers on there to let everyone arriving to the ports know what was up if they got any funny ideas, which must have been quite a sight. And I'm guessing that channel over there was a lot deeper because it doesn't look like they ever really put any fortifications on this side of it. There's a big tanker of some kind over there. That next little point right over there to our left is also the site of a mass grave. In 1866, a ship called the SS England was on its way from Liverpool to New York when it suffered an outbreak of cholera en route. With most of the crew stricken and ill, they decided to pull in here at Halifax, but were not permitted to dock until they figured out who was sick and who wasn't. So they tied up out here and had local prisoners dig a bunch of burial pits for everyone who didn't make it, which was apparently quite a few, at least 200 of them. And if you go down there today, the only thing you'll find is a tipped-over little granite obelisk, which is kind of haunting. This last little battery is Fort Ives right down there in that little open spot. They started working on that one in 1865 and kept it manned as a defensive post until the end of World War I. And after that, it was used for barracks until they shut it down completely in 1943. But they've still got 2 massive 10-inch muzzle-loading cannons sitting on their original mounts down there, which is awesome. Alright guys, I saved the best 2 for last. The next one is Fort Charlotte, which sits on George's Island, right in the middle of the harbor here. That's it, right in front of us. They built the first version of the fortress that's on there now in 1750 and used it as a prison for over 2,000 French soldiers during the 7 Years' War, which started just a few years after it was completed. And it was used for the same purpose during the American Revolution for captured privateers, eventually evolving to become part of the Halifax Defense Complex, which gave rise to most of the others that we've seen on this trip. Look at that place. I wonder what the equivalent of the expenditure for all that would have been in today's dollars. And the thing that did them all in was that within about 50 years of their construction, the invention of airplanes made all of them useless. Bombers would have just taken them out before any ships got close enough to engage. And now the granddaddy of them all, the Halifax Citadel, upon which we will find Fort George, which is by far the best condition of all of them. What we see today is the 4th iteration of the defenses built on the Citadel, with the first one going up just 1 year prior to that last place we saw in 1749. And they started building the current fort in 1828, taking 28 years to complete the thing, and the invaders they were most worried about was the United States. What a beauty. Also a victim of very poor timing, the defenses were designed to deflect shot from smoothbore cannons, also becoming useless when rifled barrels were introduced just a couple years after that structure was finally finished. And one thing I found particularly awesome is that they dug a bunch of dead-ended tunnels pointing out away from the fort, and the idea was that as a last resort, they could be packed with explosives and detonated under the assaulting troops, which I think we can all admit would be something worth witnessing, from a distance, of course. And I read that when they buried the tunnels, they covered them with a thick layer of gravel to act as shrapnel. But even if you had to blow the place up, what do you do then? Maybe the idea was just to take out as many as you could and then scuttle the fort in the process too. The attackers couldn't use it. That's the McDonald Bridge down there, going over to the town of Dartmouth, and that was built in 1955, or opened in 1955. Coastlines look good, boats look good, buildings look good. It's just those trees that kind of become the burr in my saddle. That train yard looks good. Neat area for sure. I don't know what the average temp is up here. I forgot to look at that. Bet it's a little bit chilly. Alright, we're going to be landing at a place called Shearwater. And this big base to our right is what it's going to be. You can just kind of start to see the runways coming into view. And that is the second oldest military airport in Canada, opening in 1918. And that was actually the U.S. Navy that built it, calling it NAS Halifax originally. And the main reason they wanted it was for coastal submarine patrols. And what were they flying? Why, it was the Curtiss flying boat. If you're wondering why I care about that, check out our Finger Lakes flight. We saw where that guy was from. By World War II, it was back in Canadian hands and called RAF Station Dartmouth, but there wasn't any info about what they were flying out here, unfortunately. After the war, it gained its current title of Shearwater, where they started conducting early trials on naval helicopters, and helicopters are what this place is all about today. So let's come on down and see if we can see any helicopters or planes or anything else down here. We'll definitely check out that aviation museum, see what we got going on. Bring that collective down just a little bit. And our wind is going to be about a 4-knot tailwind right now. Probably be a crosswind when we land, depending on which pad we select. And you can kind of see where the old runways were. The last one they shut down was at one on the left, but they had them crisscrossing all over the place here. Tore up some of them. They got that short little one right there, but you can kind of see once we get over them where the other runways were. Let's come down some more. So if there are any planes, we'll be able to spot them. Gosh, just look at these trees. What a bummer that is. Come on, 2024, you can't get here soon enough. Hopefully that kind of stuff will be fixed. Alright, a lot more junk over there, which is awesome. Junk everywhere. I'd take a whole flight just to explore junk piles. Nice tower of some kind there. Alright, let's come down even more here. And slow our roll. Alright, there's two of the helipads right there. And then there's two on the end of what was once another runway over there in front of us. And all of these things down here between these buildings are also helipads. And it looks like we got a couple helicopters down there. Let's see if we can tell what kind they are. I'm not good with my helicopter profiles unless it's a Robinson. Those are easy to pick out. Or a Chinook. Oh, those look like sad helicopters. They've got warped rotors on the top. Well, that's a bummer. Alright, so I don't know exactly where the air museum is. Let's just kind of swing out here and see what they got. What's all that blue stuff over there? Tarps? Covering up more junk? Maybe over here? Yeah, the performance on this is not phenomenal. We got photogrammetry, we got helicopter. Well, I don't know where the airplanes are. Let's just check over here real quick. I don't want to miss them if they're out here. Because it looked like from the satellite map there's... Okay, there we go. There's a couple of them. See them sitting over there? And one outside those two sheds. Alright, so I see one by the shed. It looks like two more over here. And maybe another sad helicopter. Yep. Well, there we go. And the website for this place on the ground showed something that looked like a big transport or a tanker of some kind. I don't see anything that big down there. They must have all their cool stuff inside. Well, I think that's going to be it. We saw what there is to see. So let's see if we can get this baby down. Then we'll take a look at the little nav map. So I'm just going to hit one of those helipads over there on the right. I'm not going to say which one, so I can act like whatever one I land on was the one I was intending to land on. I'll just say the one on the left. Alright, so let's trim that nose up, way up. And down we go. A lot of lakes out here. If you want to take a seaplane out here, no shortage of spots to take off or land. Alright, so let's kill that airspeed. Come over this way just a little bit. Well, for some reason, those are really well defined for how blurry everything else is. It's almost like they almost thought about making them in-sim helipads. We're going to make them one. And they have numbers on them too, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then it looked like out on some of the disused runways, they also had converted some of those to some helipad spots. Alright, we're taking number 3, it looks like. Okay. Not a bad landing. Not a bad landing at all. Patting myself on the back. I didn't quite nail it dead center, but pretty close. Alright. So let's shut her down real quick. So we'll kill the throttle first. There weren't any shutdown procedures with this one, so I'm guessing you start by killing the throttle and then kill the fuel. That usually does the trick. And then we'll hit the rudder brake just to slow her down a bit. Alright, let's check out little nav map here. Okay, I just updated little nav map and it's put the rainbow colored flight trail back in again, which is kind of nice. Alright, so here's where I left from, and let me just show you where I found some other helipads in the sim, and they all look like you could probably land on. This one had some trees growing out of it. That's a hospital right there. This is a hospital down here. And then there was a ship that we flew by that you guys saw that has a helipad. So it's in the satellite map and it's in the sim. So if you wanted to, you could probably plop her down right there. And then, of course, this thing has helipads all over it, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. So we took off over here, came up around... We didn't really talk about the McDonald's Bridge yet, but we came over here to check out the McKay. And then here's where Africville is down here, and that's the little museum that they have for it right down there. So I don't know how big the community was back in the day. I mean, it might have been this whole area down here. They said they just tore it up, well, 1 for the bridge and 2 for some industrial stuff they want to do. So maybe it came over here some, maybe a little bit over this way. But if you're into that kind of thing, you can check it out. All right, here's the Titanic Museum. And here, is it going to... So this thing, let's see how close we can get. All these graves right here are for the victims of the Titanic right here. That's where it is. So in the sim, just look for the furthest rail car, and both of these are parked in the sim. They might use the same map to make the one in the sim, because that thing's still there, and if you just look a little bit to the northeast, I guess, of that, it's kind of buried in the trees. I didn't try flying directly over it to see it, but even in here, it's kind of hard to spot, so I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but that's where it is right here. And these are the other cemeteries that are surrounding it. And then we came down here to Deadman's Island. It's now the public park. That's where it was. So I don't know where they were doing the target practice from. If this was the prison, this is Melville Island here, so maybe they were at the prison shooting over here, or I guess you could shoot it from anywhere you wanted to when you're running the whole town. But that's it. Now there's a big marina where the prison was. I wonder when they tore that prison down. I didn't look to see about that. And then we came over here to Dingle Tower. Yeah, and you can see here in... I don't know why it's taking so long to depixelate. That looks like it's stony there. Maybe we're just getting a bad angle on it. Maybe it just looked like a shadow from when we were flying by. Okay, here's Point Pleasant Park, and there's the Prince of Wales Tower. And if you look real close, you could probably see some of these other little structures. They got a bunch of monuments here. I think this is a Navy memorial down here. It's an anchor of some ship over there. This fort is probably pretty hard to see because even in here, it's pretty buried in the trees, so that might be totally treed over, but we could definitely see that. You might be able to see some of those little batteries right there. And this one down here, it looks like just a little building, so that wasn't too much to look at, but this was the good stuff down here. So this is Connaught Battery down here, and there's their guns. This is the one that's in pretty rough shape now. Looked like it was spray painted over and kind of crumbling and falling down, but that's a big public park now. This one is a lot more cleaned up, and they have the cannons in it. So that's the York Redoubt. That looks really cool. That's my kind of fort right there. And then here's the York Shore Battery, and this is where they were stretching the submarine net from here to all the way over here. And this is the one they built to protect the submarine net. Very interesting. And this is the one that is on the Department of National Defense property now, so you can't go and play around on this one, but it looks to be in pretty rough shape anyway. And then here's the Navy facility, and that one there, I think. But that looked pretty good in the sim, too. Oh, is this another little battery down here? Nope, those look like just little lookouts or something. Okay, then we came over here to McNabs, And here's those little searchlight platforms right there. You could see those in the sim. That was cool. Here's the quarantine station. So if we zoom in here and it'll depixelate, that's all that's really left. That's where the cistern was and whatever that building was. But you have to imagine if they were moving that many people through here. And I wonder where they had the port for this. They said it was a deep water port. So I'm not sure which side that would have been on, but there's obviously nothing of it left. And no buildings are left or anything. Look at that. Just completely desolate now. And down here they had a little rangefinder platform. I tried to spot that in the sim. I did not see anything there, but you could definitely see this. This is Fort Mcnab, which looked very cool. And here's that lighthouse was. The guy that invented kerosene. Majors Beach Lighthouse. And look how that's spelled. Majors. That's how you pronounce it. I almost said that wrong. I almost said Moggers until I saw a pronunciation key. Here's Hangman's Beach, where they would string up the bodies and let all the sailors know you better be on your best behavior while hanging out here. And here's Strawberry Battery. That one was really tough to see. But you can see where they had the little casemates down there. And then here's where they buried all the people that had cholera from England. And I wonder if you can see the little marker down there. I don't know where it is on the... Could that be it? No, it looked even smaller than that. I mean, it was tiny. It looked to be like maybe 3 feet by 3 feet square. And just toppled over. Another little battery down there. That one's probably pretty tough to spot. But you could see this one, Fort Ives. That's the oldest one that was out here. So I guess they have like ferries that would pull up over. I don't really even see a dock or anything. Well, there's a dock. That's probably where they pull up if people are visiting the island. Another little helipad down here. You can easily see that one. So land there if you want to. Oh, and then we get to Fort Charlotte. Look at this place. That was now in the sim. That looked way darker for some reason. It's all grass covered here. I thought it had a roof on it, judging by how it looked in the sim, but that was a point of interest, so they must have modded it up. But that did not look like it was covered by turf. But it definitely looked cool. And then we came over to the bad boy. This thing looked amazing. That looked really just like that Fort George on top of the Citadel. And you know what? I didn't think to see what that monument is there. And I saw that sticking up. I didn't mention it when we were flying around. And then here's where we took off from, right down here. So this is a big His Majesty's Canadian dockyard. This is a big naval shipyard here. You can see all these Navy boats down here. And then here's that other ship that you can try to land on that helipad if you want to. Then we cruised around and checked out Shearwater. And let's see if we can... Now, the nice thing about not being able to select this as an airport is it's not covered up, which is real nice. Because you know in the sim, if you select it as your destination, it covers everything up. So let's see. The planes must have been down here. I bet they used this same map because the same stuff was out there. We're going to see if those two helicopters were out there too. I don't see any big planes out there, though, so that must have been pretty much it. I wonder where that other huge one was. That's the kind of thing that it looked like it would have been like on the driveway or something, like you put it by the gate, but I'm not seeing that. All right, let's see if we can spot the other helicopters. Well, there's just one down there, but not the other one. He must have taken off before they snapped the image. Look at all these helipads, though. They're all over the place. And then I guess out here, too, there's an H. Anywhere you see an H, you can head help. This must be for like a Chinook or something where you can do a rolling landing. Then we came down for a pretty nice little landing, if I don't say so myself. And that's it. That's Halifax, guys. It looks really, really cool. I think we're going to head out to Wales next. That's going to be a great trip now that they've done it all up. The last time I flew out there, I was so disappointed because none of those castles look like castles, but they should now. Had an absolute blast, as always, guys, and I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.